My fellow Kings fans, many of us are looking to the trade deadline to give us even a little bit of hope and excitement during this god-awful Sacramento Kings season. And I'm not here to burst your bubble, but I care about you. And I want you to mentally prepare yourselves for a quiet and disappointing trade deadline. We'll talk about Sam Amick's article from The Athletic today, plus a crazy 5-team trade by ESPN that would send Trae Young to Sacramento. It's all right here for you on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And I'm not saying on this podcast that the Kings aren't going to make any trades and Scott Perry's going to be sitting on his hands and it's going to be a dull and boring trade deadline like some of the ones we experienced for the last handful of years under Monty McNair. It's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, I can tell you firsthand that Scott Perry and the Sacramento Kings are going to be and have already been working the phones. The Kings are making everybody available, and they are doing their due diligence, having conversations. But it's the circumstance of both the Kings' tradable assets and the league as a whole with the apron system that has people like Sam Amick from The Athletic writing an article last night or early this morning, releasing an article going over a lot of different trade scenarios and situations around the league, from Giannis Antetokounmpo's situation to Anthony Davis's situation, Jonathan Kuminga's situation. And of course, with how plugged in Sam is here in Sacramento with the Kings, Sam had some things to write about and to say about the Sacramento Kings situation. If you have not read this article, go and check it out. It provides a lot of really interesting stuff for the entire league, not just the Kings. I'm going to share with you some excerpts from that article and the main things that Sam talked about and shared with the Sacramento Kings. But of course, support Sam's work, support great sports journalism that The Athletic does. Go and check that out. But Sam's overall point in this article and the overall point of this podcast here today is that while the Sacramento Kings are going to be aggressively trying to make some changes and really get this rebuild rolling, free up some rotational minutes and opportunities for some of the younger guys that they do believe can be part of the long-term future, get some money off the books, get rid of some of these veterans, and on one hand, do right by them, try and get them to teams where they can contribute. And in the case of like a DeMar DeRozan, he can end his career hopefully playing as competitive of basketball as he possibly can. But on the other hand, getting these guys out that clearly aren't part of the future, clearly aren't working, and just truly spraying some Febreze with how stinky the organization is right now. The Kings want to do that, but their circumstances leave a lot to be desired. And if we're talking about likelihoods, it's more likely that the Sacramento Kings have a quiet, uneventful trade deadline than it is they have a loud fire sale type deadline where they're moving on from players left and right like a lot of you Sacramento Kings fans are hoping for or are asking for. I know many of you are putting your hopes and the last bit of interest in this Kings season in what Perry does between really the December 15th date, which is the date when a lot of players who sign contracts over the summer are eligible to be traded, like Dennis Schroeder, to February, I think 5th is the deadline. I understand that window of time is like, that's what I'm locked into. That is what's going to get me through this season. I'm not telling you to lose all hope. I'm just saying, brace yourselves. Prepare yourselves. Sam said in this article when talking about the Kings, quote, there is a very real chance that the veteran core of LaVine, Sabonis, DeRozan, and Monk could all remain past the deadline. He talks about 3 players in particular. First, Zach LaVine. According to Sam Amick, the Milwaukee Bucks have done their due diligence when it comes to Zach LaVine and paying attention to if Zach LaVine could be an asset that they could bring into. I don't know if that would help them try and convince Giannis to stay. It seems like the writing is on the wall for Giannis's time in Milwaukee coming to an end. And I personally believe that it's going to be tough for fireworks to happen in this league, this trade deadline, until that Giannis situation is figured out. I think a lot of teams are going to be on standby for what that Giannis trade looks like. Not because a lot of teams necessarily have the chance to acquire Giannis, but there's a very good chance that with the apron system, a Giannis trade is going to need to involve 3, 4, 5 teams even, which is why we're going to talk about this fun ESPN trade that they put together earlier this week. Going to talk about that in the next segment of this podcast. But the Bucks have shown interest before in LaVine. They still have interest now. But as we've talked about, as we know, and as I've shared with you all season long, why I don't expect both Zach LaVine and Domantas Sabonis, or should I say, or Domantas Sabonis, to be moved at this deadline is simply because of their money. LaVine's expensive. He's making $47 million this season with a $49 million player option next season. Again, because of the apron system, there aren't a lot of teams that are going to be eager to acquire that kind of money and add that to their books right now. In fact, I think one of the ways we're really going to see how the apron system changes the landscape of the NBA is we're going to see less max contracts being given out to players like a Trae Young or even like a De'Aaron Fox. These guys that we know are really good, have star potential, but aren't exactly there. There are shoe-in star contract, max contract players around the league. Giannis is one of them. Luka Doncic is another one. Nikola Jokic. Like, these guys are like, yes, you pay them every cent you can possibly give them under the CBA. But I think we're going to see less of those big max contracts for fringe stars than we've seen in years past. So acquiring LaVine's money, as Sam Amick talks about, might require the Kings to attach some sort of draft compensation to LaVine or to Domantas Sabonis in order to entice a team to take on those contracts. And I'm here to tell you that would be a disaster for the Sacramento Kings. The Kings draft picks are the most valuable things this organization has. There is not a single player, there's not a single name, there's not a single piece of this organization, top to bottom, that is more valuable around the league than a Sacramento Kings draft pick. Right now, the Kings cannot afford to attach a draft pick to anything. And I have a very, I have it on good authority that Scott Perry is not interested in the slightest in including any sort of draft pick to move on from either of those guys' contracts. Domantas Sabonis, a note on him from Sam Amick. Apparently the Washington Wizards, Phoenix Suns, and Chicago Bulls, which is hilarious, are all interested in Sabonis. They are on his short list, and I mean very short list, of teams that are interested in him. Just because they have interest, though, doesn't mean they have a legitimate route to get that trade done and are fully on board to absorb that money. The Phoenix Suns are interesting. The Phoenix Suns are a team that they're better than people expected. They improved after moving on from Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal. They're a team that is expected to be fighting for a playoff spot and more than likely will be involved in the postseason to some extent. I don't know about you, but Devin Booker, Domantas Sabonis pick and roll, that would be pretty interesting, pretty enticing. But are the Phoenix Suns willing, after moving off of all of the money and bad contracts that they've had over the last couple of years, are they willing to take on another potential bad contract arguably one of the worst contracts in the league, and Domantas Sabonis' money, and every team in the league is aware that in order to be most effective with Sabonis, you have to have the right kind of players around him. Do the Phoenix Suns have those right players? Out of the three teams, that's the one that I think that is most likely. The Bulls, again, would be hilarious considering the Kings and Bulls have basically just swapped rosters over the last few years. And I don't know why the Washington Wizards would do that trade at all to bring Domantas Sabonis in. So, but apparently they're on the short list. But as Sam notes in this article, Sabonis is preparing and has prepared long-term to be a Sacramento King. So clearly in the Sabonis camp, they are not expecting him to be moved, and they really shouldn't, again, because of his contract. The final note from this article about the Kings that was interesting to me had to do with Keon Ellis. According to Sam Amick, Keon is the most talked about asset that the Sacramento Kings have around the league. Here's the problem, though. One, Keon Ellis only makes $2 million. And we talked about this before. When you make that little money, you can't really expect to get a whole lot back in return because a lot of trades have to have matching salary for matching salary. That being said, if there's a team out there that wants to give a first-round pick for Keon Ellis, I think the Sacramento Kings would absolutely jump at that. But as Sam Amick notes in this article, teams are confused, perplexed, paying attention to the fact that Keon has been in and out of the rotation, has only really played over 20 minutes once or twice in the last handful of games, and he even got DNP'd not too long ago. Why is that? Is it a Doug Christie thing? Is it a Kings organization thing? I have no idea. But the likelihood of the Kings getting proper value for a player like Keon Ellis, he might be the asset that most teams are interested in. Of course, he's cheap and he's impactful, or at least we've seen him be impactful. He could help a lot of contenders, that's for sure, in a limited role off the bench. No doubt about it. But is a team willing to give up a first-round pick for him? Would the Sacramento Kings consider taking 2 seconds for him? Well, they would if they felt that they had no chance to re-sign him. But the Sacramento Kings obviously do feel, or have made it public, that they believe that they will be able to re-sign him and retain him. So, again, I'm not telling you that none of these trades are going to happen. It's going to be a dull and terrible trade deadline. But with every single scenario that Sam brings up here and everything that Sam talks about, there's a but. Didn't really talk about DeMar DeRozan. But DeMar might be stuck here too. Malik Monk might be stuck here too. Those are the two guys that I've told you over the last month. Those are the two guys that I would expect to be moved if I'm expecting anybody to be moved. It's those two because I do believe they have some sort of value and their contracts aren't horrible. And honestly, if the Kings are able to move on from both of those guys, of course, depending upon what they get, that might be a success in itself. But outside of those two, maybe a Dennis Schroeder being moved, maybe a Keon Ellis. Look, if the Kings are able to trade multiple players at this point, I think that's a victory. But like Sam's alluding to here, I don't think Kings fans should expect that to happen, even if we desperately want it to happen. This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by ZocDoc. Guys, it's 2025, almost 2026, and those days of waiting for someone to become or something to become a full-blown emergency before you see a doctor, those days are over with. No more walking it off for 6 months. No more pretending that your weird shoulder stiffness is just you sleeping wrong. It's time to take your health seriously, and ZocDoc makes that easier than ever because staying healthy is more than just hitting the gym or eating right. It's about actually getting these things checked out when something feels off. Using ZocDoc makes scheduling easier. You can search for in-network doctors and book right through the app. You get real appointment times that are listed, including same-day visits. You don't have to worry about back and forth phone calls or waiting for weeks to be seen and dealing with all the headaches of scheduling. It makes it simple to keep your health a priority, even with the busy schedule that we all have. I have used ZocDoc to finally schedule doctor's appointments that I have literally been putting off for years. It made it so easy for me to get the help that I need. So stop putting off your doctor's appointments and get the care that you need. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA. Well, even if in the real world it's unlikely that the Sacramento Kings make too many trades or are involved in a big blockbuster deal at this trade deadline, we're still going to have fun and try and manifest something happening, just like ESPN manifested a 5-team trade or put together a 5-team trade earlier this week that has Sacramento Kings fans talking. And my instant reaction to this trade is a whole heck of a lot different to where I am at now with this trade. Here is the trade. A 5-team deal involving your Sacramento Kings, the Atlanta Hawks, the Dallas Mavericks, the Golden State Warriors, and the Detroit Pistons. In this trade, the Atlanta Hawks get both Anthony Davis and Jonathan Kuminga, along with Buddy Hield and Devin Carter. The Dallas Mavericks get Zach LaVine and 2 future first-round picks, neither of which involve the Sacramento Kings picks whatsoever. The Golden State Warriors get Kristaps Porzingis, a big man, to plug into that Warriors situation for one last deep playoff run or trying to put together another playoff run for Steph Curry. The Detroit Pistons get Doug McDermott and cash considerations in this deal. So Detroit just helps basically make this deal work, and they get paid to do so and take on an expiring deal in McDermott. And your Sacramento Kings get Trae Young and Luke Kennard. To simplify this deal, essentially, the Kings are trading Zach LaVine, Devin Carter, and Doug McDermott for Trae Young and Luke Kennard. No draft picks involved one way or another. Kings don't get any draft picks, and they're not sending out any draft picks, and that's the big point. My first initial reaction to this was, ew. Trae Young, common sense says, you're trying to rebuild. The last thing you should want to do is bring in a star. The Kings should not be star hunting right now, blah, 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 blah. And Trae Young, like we talked about last segment, is one of those borderline stars to where he and his camp are going to be seeking a maximum contract extension, but because of the CBA, because of these aprons, I think a lot of teams are going to be very hesitant to give him that contract extension. But the more I thought about it, and the more I really thought about the question of, do you pay Trae Young because he's looking for that next payday, or do you let him walk? The more I actually started to like this trade because, like we talked about, the likelihood of the Kings getting ideal trades is pretty low. This might be the type of trade that the Kings have to make that has the potential of turning into something good that's kind of hidden. Trae Young has a $48.9 million player option next year. Almost exactly the same amount, right around the same amount as Zach LaVine. So you're essentially trading Zach LaVine's player option situation, which, again, all signs point to Zach's going to take that money. He should. To Trae Young's player option situation. But Trae Young signing a contract extension has been a whole heck of a lot more of a conversation amongst the Atlanta Hawks and any suitable trade partner for them, any team that would acquire Trae Young. It's believed and it's expected that they would acquire Trae with the desire to get a deal done, an extension done as soon as possible. But in the case of the Sacramento Kings, you can pay him, and maybe you get away with giving him not a maximum contract deal, but maybe you try a shorter term deal, but still an expensive deal, maybe hovering still around that $50 million per year range for 2 or 3 years to kind of test him out during this rebuild. And what you're acquiring, you're getting an elite shooter, an elite playmaker. Your point guard situation is handled short term, but you're also getting a god-awful defender. Trae Young is a terrible defender. Trae Young doesn't exactly check a lot of those boxes or meet a lot of those pillars of Scott Perry's future vision for the Sacramento Kings and how he wants them to play. I have a pretty good understanding that that Scott Perry's not the biggest fan of Trae Young. So maybe this is all just a fantasy. But then that got me thinking about the other side of this, the more ideal side of this. The Kings acquire Trae Young. They let him walk. If Trae doesn't accept that player option, doesn't pick up that player option, decides to test his value in free agency, go negotiate with other teams, the Sacramento Kings essentially bow out of it. This is the most ideal scenario. Why? because you got off Zach LaVine's money. In addition, you also got off of Devin Carter's money that's on the books for next year, which is a little over $5 million. That means that you have freed up $54 million roughly next year. $54 million is, I mean, it's not like you're going to go and use that money to sign a marquee free agent, but it does give you some flexibility, gives you a little more wiggle room. The Zach LaVine problem is essentially gone. It's a reset. The idea of Scott Perry trading for Trae Young, I think, would send off some alarm bells amongst Sacramento Kings fans, even if you like Trae Young, because doesn't that sure sound like a Vivek Ranadive move more than like a Scott Perry move based off of what Scott has said and who we know Vivek to be? But if Scott can acquire Trae with the intention of letting him walk if he doesn't pick up that player option, so be it. And if Trae Young does pick up that player option and remains in Sacramento for one more year, they can, of course, try and trade that on a 1-year expiring contract. It's easier to trade if they want to. Or they now are going into next season with one more year of an elite playmaking shooting point guard than a elite 3-level scorer in Zach LaVine, who clearly has no interest in really being here in Sacramento and is ready to get the heck out of here. The more I think about it, the more I think that's a good scenario for the Sacramento Kings. And these, again, might be the exact type of trades that the Kings need to humor. They're not perfect. They definitely have their risks. They have their cons. But if you handle it right, it could end up being a good thing. These are the type of deals that, while a 5-team deal involving this many big names might seem unrealistic, these are potentially the type of deals that the Sacramento Kings will need to try to get involved in if they want to be active at this trade deadline. New year, new systems. And this is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of running a business and think, there has to be a better way. And there is. Today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. If you're ready to make your workday smoother and keep customers connected without all the headaches, Quo makes upgrading your setup easier than ever. It's a streamlined system that makes such a big difference when communicating with customers. If you have calls, texts, and voicemails, they come in one clear view that keeps everything organized and helps you stay responsive. You're able to share one team number and makes it so much easier to make sure nothing gets missed. The AI summaries and call logging can feel like having an assistant keeping track of every detail for you. It's surprisingly easy. You can work from your phone or your computer, keep your existing number, and add teammates in minutes. Make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off of your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNBA. That's quo.com/LockedOnNBA. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. And like we said at the top of the show, this episode of Locked On Kings is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays, man, they move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every single drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or there's a momentum-changing play or a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment with live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, total, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. So earlier today, I put out a question involving trading Keegan Murray on social media that admittedly is a little bit premature. But I'm going to bring the question and the conversation and the context to this podcast so you have a better understanding of the scenarios of trading Keegan Murray. And we can talk about and kind of get an understanding or an idea of what we would consider to be proper value or can't turn down value for Keegan. Because like I've shared with you, obviously the Kings extended Keegan Murray. They're still waiting to see and waiting for him to show if he can be more what we all believe him to be at this point, more of a top option offensively. And he's going to get that opportunity to show that as this season rolls on. But no player on this team, with how bad this team is untouchable. Every player should be available for the right price. And for the Sacramento Kings, it would take a deal that they can't refuse or feel they can't refuse for Keegan. But what exactly does that mean? What exactly does that look like realistically? Well, first and foremost, it's important to understand with this conversation, and that's why the question I put out on social media was a little premature. Because Keegan Murray signed his contract extension, according to Spot Track, he is not eligible to be traded until July 1st of 2026. So not at this year's trade deadline. And unless the draft is pushed back further than it was this year, because the draft was on June 25th and 26th of 2025. So it's likely that Keegan will not be eligible to be traded until days after the NBA draft. So that changes a lot of things. You can't use Keegan on draft night to move up. You can't use Keegan before the draft or at this trade deadline to completely start a rebuild and stockpile draft picks. But realistically, when we start talking about offers that the Kings have to strongly consider, what did we talk about in the first segment when it came to attaching draft picks potentially to Domantas Sabonis or Zach LaVine in order to move that contract? What did I say? Draft picks, especially the Sacramento Kings' own draft picks, are the most valuable thing to this organization right now. This roster does not have a star on it. This roster does not have a future building block on it, like a true building block. They're going to be looking for it. And the draft is the way that the Kings get this rebuild done right. It has to be through the draft. Hopefully free agency and trades can work themselves out too, but it has to be the draft for the Kings to find that next star or stars to truly execute this properly and put the Kings in a perennial playoff conversation. It has to be the draft. So draft picks are the most valuable. Of course, I'm not saying that you can't get a young player or young players in return for Keegan Murray. Maybe you can down the road, but right now, in my mind, the most realistic, best return for Keegan Murray might be multiple first-round picks. Of course, the context of what those picks are, who those picks are from. Like we're talking, I'll put out the question that I put out on social media. If a team offered you 2 future first-round picks for Keegan Murray, assuming those first-round picks or feeling pretty good about those first-round picks and the possibility for them to convey into lottery picks or just outside of the lottery. Not picks that are slated to be 25 through 30 from championship contender teams. Not picks that have heavy protections that are more than likely to become second rounders 2 or 3 years down the road. I'm talking picks that have the true likelihood of being bare minimum in that 13, 14, 15, 16 range. And hopefully picks that are even a little higher than that. Would you do that for Keegan Murray? A lot of the reaction is kind of the same reaction that I've had when talking about Keegan Murray in the past. The Kings need more players like Keegan, not less. But at the same time, Keegan Murray's 25 years old right now. I know Scott Perry doesn't want to put the 3 to 5 year timeline on anything. He doesn't want to constrict himself in that way. That's the right thing to do. But in reality, we're looking at 3 to 5 years of the Kings going from where they're at now to rebuilding properly to then getting themselves. That doesn't mean that in 5 years they're hopefully starting to look good. No, in 5 years you're talking about now they're a potential championship contender. At that point, Keegan is between 28 and 30 years old. 3 years from now, Keegan's 28. 5 years from now, Keegan's 30. That doesn't mean that he couldn't contribute. He'd be exiting or on the very edge of his prime at that point. Could still absolutely contribute to a championship caliber team. But if you could move Keegan Murray maybe in the 2027 NBA draft on draft night, and you can use him to move up in that draft to get a player that you really, really want, or use Keegan Murray to get a draft pick that year, or a lottery pick that year, or a pick outside the lottery that year, so you have 2 of them going forward, plus a future pick on top of that later, I think the Kings have to really strongly consider that. So when I talk about deals that the Kings can't refuse, again, we're talking about after July 1st of this year, so we're not talking at this year's deadline. But I think that's what Kings fans should consider. I love Keegan. You know how big of a fan I am of Keegan Murray. I believe in Keegan. I believe Keegan can be more than what he's shown to be. I believe Keegan can be and should be part of the future of the Sacramento Kings. But draft picks are the most valuable thing to this organization. And if on July 2nd you got a phone call from a team that was offering you 2 firsts for Keegan Murray, I'm just saying the Kings have to really, really strongly consider that. Want to hear your thoughts on that? Want to hear your thoughts on Sam Amick's article? Want to hear your thoughts on that crazy 5-team trade from ESPN? Share them with me. I want to hear from you now. You've heard enough of me blabbing. Hit me up at MattGeorgeSack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. I appreciate your support as always. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.